Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another cool pinball repair video for you this evening. This is Chicago Coins Gunsmoke. We're going to finish it up finally. We've been working on this for 3 or 4 videos so far. And on the last one we did the Playfield. We have done under the Playfield. We have done down in the mech panel. We did a little bit in the back box. There was a missing part. But we're down to now it's playing, but it just needs some minor things done. So the first thing that I'm going to do, if you didn't see the previous videos, some of this will confuse you, but go back and check those out. The first thing I'm going to do is replace the start button. The start button's missing. They took it off and put a bolt in it. Haven't figured it out yet. I don't know how they were starting it. I know sometimes when you drop a coin through it starts it, but it didn't have the credit unit in the back, so I don't know. They've done a lot of stuff that makes no sense on this one. So I'm going to attempt to remove this bolt and put the start button back in. All right. And then we're going to move that back down where it goes to where the button will hit the switch and start the game. Should be as simple as that, but we'll see. So luckily, it appears that a Gottlieb start button is the same on the old Gottlieb stuff. I know y'all like to say Gottlieb. It's always Gottlieb to me, people. So I was able to buy this because they make these reproduction. And on the end, it takes a 1/4 inch C-clip or E-clip or whatever you want to call that. 1/4 inch. Okay? Now, if you look, the hole on the back is smaller than the hole on the front. Boy, it's tight. I think we're all right. Right? On the front, it's bigger. Right? So you can actually push it through and it will just barely go in. I don't know if that's too tight. I might have to drill that out a little bit. Yeah, I think it's too tight actually. You can't get a Chicago coin one, so I'm going to make this slightly larger, this hole, and then the hope is that it can push back out with the spring of the blade, right? I don't have much of a choice though because they don't make reproduction Chicago coin parts, or most parts, but I think we can make it happen. All right, so check out that big screw. That was the closest thing I had, folks. It fits. Okay, the button looks great. And best of all, it works great. Look at that. Now the reason that's bent like that is because the original button must have been slightly different, but I don't know. This thing's been hacked up a lot, so I'm not sure. But if you put spacers, some of these spacers to get this out away from the door, they wouldn't have to be bent, they could be straight. But it works good the way it is. So, and it springs back because the this is basically spring steel that these switches are made out of, so it goes right back where it's supposed to be. So I think that's going to work just fine for a start button. Scratch that one off the list. Okay, one of the other things we noticed on the previous video while we were test playing it is that the gate didn't work right. After we went through all the trouble to make sure that it did. But Joey had just cleaned the Playfield, so it looks like the gate just, whenever he pulled that apart, it just came out of the relay. So let me pop that back in the way I think it's supposed to go. So this relay works kind of unique. There is a little bar that passes up through the Playfield to that gate. So normally it's like this, right? So what happens is, when this relay pulls in, because it wants to open the gate, this pulls down, the switch is closed, and that little bar presses that little weight up. And they have made it just enough where it opens the gate. Beautiful! Beautiful. All the companies did something similar, but this is how Chicago Coin did it. And it works great. But it only works if that little bar is in the right spot, and it is. So I think that's going to fix our gate. What's next on the list? All right, so one of the things next is I'm going to check all these bulbs on this light board. Borb. I was thinking bulb, people. So see how these have like a little shallow dish? And then these, it's round. The ones that are shallow, it's so that it can hold a globe, because those are for flash bulbs. So the ones, the blinking bulbs, 455s. The original ones had a round globe. Well, we had a horrible situation where those became unobtainium. And then, look what happened. Straight out of the heavens. Like manna from above. This company, Memotronics, started selling them again. And it's a wonderful thing. 455 bulbs are available again, folks. They're not even that expensive. So what was going on was people were selling new old stock ones from back in the day, and they wanted a fortune for them because they were running out. And then finally they got China to get off their butt and start making new ones. And so the difference between one of these and a regular bulb is, if I can get the freaking thing in there, this should not be as complicated as it is. My depth perception's all messed up. Okay, because of the camera. All right, so here's the difference. Oh, it blinks on its own. Now remember, this is a electromechanical game, so nothing is telling it to turn on and off. It's just doing it on its own, using a little filament in there that gets heated up and moves and turns it off and then cools down and turns it back. So you put these, the reason they have them there is because they're behind the title of the game, and it's attract mode. So in newer machines, they, the computer turns bulbs on and off. And it's just to make you look that way. So you're walking through the pinball parlor, as it were, and there's 20 games. And so if this one has some lights blinking behind it, maybe you'll notice it sitting over there in the corner and go put a dime in it. All right, so it's blinking, but look, it's making the other lights blink a little bit too. Some people don't like that, but that's kind of how it's supposed to be. We had a problem though when we were playing it where all of the lights dim whenever the pop bumpers hit and stuff. So I'm going to see if we can do anything about that, if we can figure out why it's doing that. Sometimes that's a bad connection on the fuses, a bad connection on the lock relay, or a bad connection on a Jones plug somewhere. So we'll see if we can get that a little better, but a lot of times you can't. They have put a power switch on this game. I'll show you that. I think the problem, and you tell me what you think. They have put this power switch on the game, and the wire, it's not, it's small wire. The gauge isn't very high. So I think we're getting just a little current drop whenever that hits. This is not hot or anything, so it's not I don't think it's a problem, but I think that might be what's going on. That might be how to fix the power dropping, because the way they've got it wired up, and this is the correct way, is the power comes in from the wall, runs through this little wire to this switch, and then back through the other little wire to where the line originally plugged in. Originally these did not have on-off switches. So every amp in the game is running through this little line. So it could just be that this wire is too small. So yeah, so watch our previous videos on this game if you are interested in that. I might have to think about that a little bit. This thing, like I said, it had a lot of hacks to it. It's a cool game. I'm not saying that it's, we love working on it. Everything's cool, but there was a bunch of stuff changed. Some of it, I don't even know what they were doing. Okay, so that's that. So the Playfield lights are holding solid right now, but the back box lights are blinking because of the blinkers. I've noticed that before on other ones. Might do a little research on that. And it's, it's not the worst case. If you don't like it, you can take those back out and put regular ones in. I want to check this out too. See how it says 1 or 2 players? It's fun to compete. And the 1 is always lit up. I want to confirm that that's supposed to be like that. The 2 I've never seen light up. So does it only light up when you hit the second player, whenever you hit the start button twice? Or how does that work? So I'm going to look in the schematics and see what lights that up. So here is the schematics. Score display lights. See how it says score glass display lights? The one player, the one that's always lit up, is just wired into that. So it's always on. Now the second player light, the 2 number that I was talking about, it only lights up if the second coin relay is on, which is if you put a second coin in. So basically that'll only light up if you've hit start twice. So that's kind of how I figured. Now the first player up lights go through the player control stepper unit on the back. And the second player up lights also go through the player control stepper unit on the back. So that are the lights that just illuminate the score, not the 1 and the 2 that I was talking about down at the bottom. Now, when the game over relay pulls in, that turns the second player lights on, which is where we are right now. The first player lights stay on through the player control stepper unit. So at game over, the 4 lights for the score and the 4 lights for the score, they all come on, but it does not turn this one on. So, in other words, it's working perfectly. Now the flickering, here is the lock relay. This one switch turns power on to both sets of lights. These are the lights for the back glass. These are the lights for the playfield. The playfield is not flickering right now. The back glass is with the blinkers. So that particular problem probably wouldn't be that power cord thing that I was talking about. However, it could be a bad connection on this, on either the Jones plug going into the back box or this fuse here. So I'm going to look at it just to make sure everything looks cool. I did clean the Jones plugs and even the one that goes to that fuse board. But I'm going to mess with that just to make sure if I get that fuse or maybe a new fuse in there, maybe to make it work a little steady, a little more rock steady. The other day I said that and I was talking about Aretha Franklin, Rock Steady, and they said, no, that was a song by so-and-so. There's 2 songs. There's one that goes, steady, steady, rocking all night long. There's that one. And then there's the Aretha Franklin where she keeps yelling, rock steady, baby. I like the Aretha one better. They're both good, though. But, yeah, so we need to get the lights a little more rock steady. So let me look at that fuse. All right, so the fuse holder, I turned it off, and the fuse holder was actually very hot. Both of them were, both of the light fuse holders. To the point where you could almost not touch it. Which I would think is probably because of resistance, so it's not making a very good contact with the fuse. All right, so we're going to play a happy little game called What Fuses Did They Put in There? So it's supposed to be a 1 amp, a 15 amp, and 3 10 amps. So let's see how close we are. I'm going to bet we're way off. Okay, we have found the 15. So that one is correct. And by the way, everything's working, so everything's up and running. Is this a 1? Ah, it's a 5. 5's not 1, people. Come on, people. Come on now, you're not supposed to put a 5 where there's supposed to be a 1. And then all 3 of these should be 10s. Ah, the old 20 where the 10 goes. Watch me put them back and they all blow if they're not 20s. And 20. All right. So, on our channel, we get a lot of people that are beginners in electronics, and we love that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So I'll explain it to you just so that you know how it works. So on a fuse, there's two numbers. One is the voltage of the fuse. That's how much voltage can go through it before it. How much voltage can it properly fuse? And then the other number is the number with an A, that's amperage. How much amperage can go through the fuse before the fuse blows? So if it calls on the schematics, for instance, for a 1 amp fuse, the reason that they're doing that is because if something shorts, like if two wires touch together or something burns up, it's going to connect the power straight to ground. Well, when it does that, it draws all kinds of amperage through that line. And so they determine by the size of the line and what they're putting the fuse on and everything, when they want that fuse to blow. So once it starts drawing 1 amp through that fuse, they want it to blow the fuse. So normally it probably uses half an amp. And so if it uses half an amp and everything's working normal, the fuse won't blow because it's a 1 amp fuse. So it can handle an amp going through it. Now you run into another problem, and people can correct me down below if they know this better than me, but this is how I understand it. They generally make 2 or 3 different voltage ratings of fuses. So you can go up on that. You never want to go down. And the reason that you don't want to go down is because the fuse won't work right. So this is where I may be wrong, but I think I got this right. So this machine right now, the light bulb ones that are 10 amps, that's 6 volts is what the lamps run on. So any fuse that's above 6 volts will be able to work properly. Okay, but let's say that one of them is on the line coming in, and there's 120 volts running in. Well, usually they make fuses in 32 volt, these little glass cartridge fuses, 32 volt fuses, 125 volt fuses, and 250 volt fuses. So if you had 120 or 110, whatever, running into the cabinet, you need a 120 or 125 volt fuse, or a 250 volt fuse will work, because that's the limit of how much voltage it can run through it. Here's what happens if you put a 32 volt fuse in it. You would think that it would immediately blow, but as I understand it, and again, you can correct me down below if people know better, it will not blow a 32 volt fuse at the proper amperage. So if you put like a 1 amp 32 volt fuse, a 1 amp 120 volt fuse will blow properly, but the 32 volt fuse may not blow at all, or may blow whenever, it may take 5 amps to blow it, or something like that. So it's not that it will blow quicker, it's that it might not blow. So that's how I understand. I may be wrong about that, but so what do you want to do whenever you have a blown fuse? Well, if a fuse blows, there's usually a reason that it blew, and it's usually not the fuse. Usually there's something shorted somewhere that's blowing the fuse. So you need to figure that out, right? Now, if you put another fuse in and it doesn't blow, then you got lucky and it was just the fuse was old or something. Or maybe there was some kind of freak thing and everything's cool. But usually you'll put a new fuse in and it's going to blow that one too, right? But here's what you need to do. If the schematics are saying you need a 1 amp 120 volt fuse, then you need a exactly 1 amp fuse. You can't go higher than that, because what'll happen is, let's say you put a 5 amp like they did in there. The reason they said 1 amp is because the wire is going to burn up, or whatever they're protecting with that fuse is going to burn up after it gets up above 1 amp of current running through there. So if you put a 5 amp in, it's going to start drawing 3 or 4 amps through, burn up whatever the thing is that's having a problem, and never blow the fuse. In extreme situations, you can actually start fires that way, because if it burns up the wire or something, I mean, it literally burns it up, catches it on fire. So you got to be careful about that. So if it's calling for a 1 amp fuse, the amperage has to be right. So you need to get a 1 amp. The other ones are calling for a 10 amp. You need to get a 10 amp. They've got a 20 amp in there. That's pretty extreme. I mean, that's way off. You know, it's not even close. Yeah, it'll work because it's higher, but if there's a problem, it's not going to blow, and you want it to blow if there's a problem. That's the whole purpose of a fuse. The fuse is not part of the machine. It's to protect parts of the machine. So they put fuses in there so that things don't catch on fire or things don't burn up or you don't have catastrophic failures. That's the purpose of the fuse. This is the weak link, you know, so that's the first thing that's going to pop. So whenever you're looking for one, you want the amperage to be exactly the same, no lower, no higher, and you want the voltage to be the same or higher, right? Everybody starts off somewhere. There's no shame if you don't know that. I didn't know that whenever I started. Had no clue, right? So, but that's what the deal is. So I'm going to put the right ones in. I'm going to put a 1 amp, a 15 amp, a 10 amp, a 10 amp, and a 10 amp. And in this particular situation, one of them is on the, or maybe I think two of them are on the 120, so they have to be at least 120 volt. I usually, all the ones I get are 250 volt. Sometimes on the higher ones like 10 amp and stuff, they're 32 volt. So that works fine since I'm only using them on a 6 volt power line. You understand? So they're just lighting up light bulbs. That line that the fuse is on is only 6 volts. So a 32 volt fuse will work just fine because it's higher than 6 volts. If I had a 6 volt fuse, they don't even make those that I know of, but if I had a 6 volt fuse, that might not be a good idea because the voltage is going to change a little bit, especially when you turn it on, it might be higher or whatever. So you don't want to be right on the line. There needs to be some wiggle room on the voltage. Now on the amperage, it needs to be exactly the same. So I'm gonna clean up the fuse holders with a wire brush. They look pretty good. It's just they're running hot and they're dirty. I'm gonna clean them up with a wire brush. I'm gonna squeeze them together a little bit so that they hold the fuse better. They've lost some of their springiness over the years. And then we're gonna put the right fuses in and see if that changes how the light bulbs work. All right, so we got them back in there. Now that may not change anything, and we need to see if the bottom two immediately blow when we turn it on, since they had 20s in there. Maybe they were having a problem where the fuse was blowing. So I'm going to turn it on. Let's see what happens. They did not immediately blow. Okay, now that may not fix anything, but we'll see. Let's see if the back glass is still blinking the same as it was. It's still blinking, but not as badly as it was. Well, I don't know. I think it's a little better, but it's still doing it. I can still see it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to try to do is turn it off and reseat the Jones plugs in the back box, which are what carries the power for the lights up to the back box. That didn't help either, so it's still doing it a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a jumper wire across. They've got a little terminal strip they've put here in the back that they've attached that wire to for the on-off switch. And I'm going to put a jumper wire across it to just jump the switch out. Now this jumper wire isn't all that stout either, but the switch is also going to still be hooked up. So we're putting it in parallel basically, so it should at least help it. So we'll see if that changes anything. And we'll try playing it and see if the lights still dim whenever the pop bumpers hit, like drastically. All right, I'm going to show you what I mean about the lights dimming, and there's a couple other things that I noticed too. One, the pop bumper lights need some work. Remember, we haven't cleaned everything in the back box yet either. So let's test our start button. The score rails are resetting, but they're not, one of them's running on too far, but we haven't cleaned those yet either. Okay, I'm going to try to start a 2-player game. All right, we got our 2-player light finally. It's all gravy. Okay, so watch how they dim whenever the pop bumpers fire, or the flippers. Oh yeah, Gunsmoke score. 500. All right, it did not advance to the second player either. The left, Gunsmoke score light is blinky. All right, so on a two-player game, it just stays on the first player's first ball. So the player unit is not stepping up properly. If you play a one-player game, though, it works just fine. Okay, so things I'm noticing, though, it's not alternating either. See how this light is always on and that one never is? It's supposed to go back and forth. This one's on, but that one never is. Right? Neither one of those is on, so something's going on there. This light is blinking in the hole here. The pop bumper bulbs aren't the ones out. So we got to mess with that kind of stuff. But some of that is going to be the player unit in the back. So let me see what makes it alternate first. So you can see the left side 100 points lane, right side 100 points lane, left lane bonus score light, right lane bonus score light. These ones that are on different sides, left and right, are changed by the bottom lane alternating relay. Depending on which position it's in, different stuff lights up. That's not going back and forth. The left and right 100 points when lit, which was the two stand-up targets that I was talking about, it only lights when the bonus unit gets to all the way to the top. So I probably haven't had that happen yet, so that's probably why I haven't seen those light. So those do not bounce back and forth, just the other two. All right, so interestingly enough, the bottom lane alternating relay, is turned on and off depending on which position you are on your 10 to 90 point score reel. So as you get 10 points, now you're at 20 points, it would connect, and then at 30 it would turn off, and at 40 it would connect, and 50 it would turn off, blah, 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 blah. And all of those, for player 1 or player 2, run through this player control unit that we still haven't messed with. And then remember, it won't advance from player 1 to player 2. Also controlled by this. So we've got problems there, obviously. So it's not alternating, probably because it's not making good contact through that player control unit. So here is that player control unit. It's actually two on top of each other. That's why it says player control 1 and player control 2. It does not mean player 1 and player 2. It just means that the player control unit has two boards on it. So I'm going to pop that loose and we're going to fix it. Now, it does not have any switches over here, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's see if it will step up. Didn't we already test it? Heck no. It won't do nothing. Well, there's your problem. It won't move from player 1 to player 2. No wonder we can't get to player 2. So yeah, so let me take that loose and we'll start taking her apart and cleaning it up. Okay, so there's a big washer on the top, or a big nut on the top to remove that spider. It comes right off. And then there are 4 screws in the corner, or nuts in the corner. And then you get down under the first one, and then there is a sleeve to separate them. And then there is the other spider. Notice someone has put paint on one of them so that you can tell which direction it goes back. It's usually like that. Okay. And so once you've done that, it's just like any other stepper unit. You just clean it up, put it all back together. We need to oil it to make sure that it moves freely. And we'll try that without the stepper on it, without the spider on it, and then we'll put the spider back and try it again, and then put the top board back, try it again, and put the other spider on and try it again. So you just want to make sure that everything's moving freely and it's well oiled. Now on the actual stepper unit, the actual board there, I put Super Lube dielectric grease so that it lubricates the spiders and it can spin around a lot easier and all that. So I'm just going to clean that up with some sandpaper and then start putting it back together. Some sandpaper and put a little 3-in-1 oil on the shaft where it goes through the metal bushing through the center of the board there. Okay, so I'm going to show you this. It's going to be a little hard to see, but see the shaft here? I put a little oil on it. And let me show you something just so you understand. If I turn this by hand, I'm turning this shaft. It takes a lot of force to turn that. I mean, literally, probably 20 or 30 pounds of force to turn that, because it's combating that spring there. See how the spring's wound around? So they've got that wound really tight. It doesn't need to be anywhere near that tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this loose from here and unwind like one turn to see how that is. Okay, so I just unwrapped it one turn, and it's much easier now. And it still goes back to home position. No problem. Now this, keep in mind, this thing only moves like 2 steps, or a couple steps. So it moves just fine, very free. It doesn't take a ton to move it. The problem is, when this pulls in, watch this. When this coil pulls in, see this lever? See how I just pushed down under one of those things? This spring is supposed to pull this back up and turn that gear, and it can't do that if this spring's wound really tight. This particular one has a spring missing too. There's supposed to be one from here to here. So it's only got one of its 2 springs that it's supposed to have, so we got to fix that. See, it's not strong enough to move it, and it certainly wasn't with the extra turn on it. It's supposed to pull up and push it that extra spot, right? And again, it only does it like one step. They've only made it work like one step because it's 1 player or 2 player. 1 player, 2 player. And that's all that it does. It just goes back and forth, back and forth. So I got to get the other spring on it, and I've got to keep cleaning it. All right, I didn't have the correct spring, but I got it on there. And cleaned it up, put it all back together, so when it resets, boom, and then when it pulls in, boom. So it's basically going to go back and forth between that over and over again. 1 player, 2 player. 1 player, 2 player. Now the whole thing is, though, some of that it doesn't have to move. Like in a 1 player game, it never moves. So in a 1 player game, though, all of that stuff has to be connected properly. If it was if the PCB there was dirty, then the signal wouldn't go through, and you would get problems like the alternating relay not working and all that stuff. So, you know, that's still going to be score stuff too. But I think that will fix that problem. So let's play it again and see what it does, if it's any different. All right. Yeah, it's still not alternating. You see that? Oh, it did alternate. You see it? Second player. Whoa. First player. It should alternate, though, as you score 10 points. Like it should be doing it right now. That Gunsmoke score thing is so cool. Need to get the bonus score up 1 more point, so we can see if it lights those 2 other lights there. Come on, you sucker! It did. See them lit? You see it, right? All right. So yeah, our alternating relay appears to be working. Oh, look, the gate opened. Our alternating relay appears to be working when it goes from player 1 to player 2, but it doesn't work. It's not working. I'll bet that's because it's wired backwards. I'll bet it's still not moving. That's what's going on. All right, for it to go from the left lane bonus to the right lane bonus, this has to move, period. So it must be turning on. But it should be turning off every time it gets to like 1, 3, odd numbers on both sides. That should that should turn it on and off. And it's not. It's just doing it when you switch from one player to the other. So there's still something is not set up right. They've got a jumper wire in the wrong spot or something on the 10 to 90 unit, or switch is stuck closed or something. I don't know. It's been rewired. This thing, if you didn't see the earlier videos, there's crazy hacks in this, like switches inside of it that you can't press, extra flipper buttons that you can't press. They had a kicker in the shooter lane, like to auto launch the ball on an EM. Just crazy stuff. A start button that you can't press. So I don't know. It could be that they've rewired the thing or something. All right, so we're trying to figure out why it won't alternate. So this is the tens reel on the one player, and the way they did theirs, it looks like, is the board is on the outside of the reel, which is cool because it makes it easier to clean. And it should be, as this spins around, when it gets to 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, it should connect this common to that wire that's all daisy chained together and turn on that alternating relay. So I'm going to clean that up, and we'll see if that gets it to work. All right, so I started cleaning it, and listen to this. Hear it tapping? That's because it's not touching. So that's why it ain't working. It's disconnected. So the line is literally broken. So I need to re-bend that and re-tension it so it sits down on the board there. All right, so I started it back up, and I thought for a minute that it didn't work, but it did work. Part of the problem is there's not much that scores 10 points. So if you hit these, for instance, that's 1 point, but it's about to roll over, and you'll see it wigwag. We are working. And then this is 1 point, apparently, and these are 10 points. Right? Jumped back. So, that fixed it. So now I got to do the second player. Let's see why the second player one's doing it. It must have a similar issue. All right, folks, so the second player one was actually working right. So that's why it was over to the right whenever it started. It's just you don't score 10 points that often, so it wasn't wig-wagging as much as I thought it should. But I was biased because the first player one wasn't working right. But now it's all working. I cleaned all the score motors, the score reels, cleaned the 0 to 9 unit. All right, so we cleaned all that up, and then I had one last thing I needed to test. Now, I showed you earlier how when you hit the start button, it starts the game. So that's working perfectly. I figured out that the reason that it's working is because when you hit the start button, it pulls in the replay reset relay. And that switch right there closes and pulls in the game reset relay, and that makes everything else work. That will become important here in a second. So that all worked fine. But then, remember, we added the coin unit. So I needed to see if the coin switch would add credits to the game. Well, guess what? It did not. When you hit the coin switch, it just started the game by pulling in the game reset relay. So I started looking at it, and of course all this stuff's been hacked, like I said. So this 25-cent micro switch does not exist in our game, and this 25-cent credit relay does not exist in our game. This 5-cent micro switch does not exist in our game, nor the wiring, and this coin adjustment jack does not exist in our game. It's just not even there, and it looks like it was never there, so I don't know. And then there is a 5-cent unit, which is some kind of stepper unit. It doesn't exist in our game. Now notice there's a dotted line around that, so I guess maybe that's not in all of them. So the way they had it wired up was this 10-cent micro switch. If you put in a dime, this doesn't exist, but this wire, black and red wire, connected right to the game reset relay and turned it on. So because of that, there was no way to store credits on the game. If you see here, it says the replay unit step-up coil is pulled in by the 5-cent relay. But we don't have a 5-cent relay, and we don't have a 5-cent unit. So ours was nothing like this, and it all looks factory, but I think it's just been heavily modified. So what I did was I was sitting here going, oh man, what am I going to do? And right about that time, luckily, thankfully, this customer of ours named Chris came in. Now Chris, he knows his stuff. He said that he used to do some electrical stuff that was all like, you know, bundles of wires like inside of an EM pinball machine. So he started helping me out. And Chris was able to find the wiring that runs to the step-up unit, this yellow and red wire, down through the loom. And then we found this black and red wire coming from the micro switch. And instead of having it come up here and turn this on, I disconnected it. And now when you hit the micro switch, it adds a credit on the step-up unit. Tell them how helpful Chris was, Joe.
Boy, I'm glad he came by. I don't know what we would have done if he wouldn't have came in. It would have just been a disaster.
We told him we were going to mention him on the video, and he was like, oh, no, you don't have to do that. And I was like, you fixed the whole thing. And he said, well, I mean, I found the wire. He's a good guy. So Chris helped us fix it. A customer just happened to be hanging out. He helped us drag it down. So thank you, Chris. So what we did, like I said, we took this black and red wire, and instead of having it trigger the game reset relay, we now have it trigger the replay unit step up. So if you put a dime in, you get a credit, period. Every time you hit that switch, you get a credit. Now it still is set up where if you win a free game, you get a credit. If you do the special, you get a credit. All of that's still the same. We didn't mess with any of that. It's just they had modified the thing. I guess they didn't want you to be able to tell that there were credits on it. It must have been for a location that didn't allow that legally or something. I don't know. But we got it fixed because of Chris's help. He's the man. And then it still is set up. We didn't break this line. We just took loose this line from here. We left this line. So it's still set up so if you hit start, this pulls in. So if you put in a dime, it steps up the credit unit like it should. And if you have more than 0 credits, when you hit start, this closes and the game resets and it starts up. And if you hit it again, you get a 2-player game. So everything is everything. So now Joey is going to test play it for you. And you can watch his skills on Gunsmoke pinball machine. Here we go. Ooh.
I meant to do that.
They haven't seen it with the lights out yet, Joe. Some of them don't like it with the lights out, though. Oh, you should hear them complain. You probably read it.
I read them sometimes.
I was going to fix the light thing, people, and Joey said he didn't think it was that big of a deal and that it was pretty common.
Yep.
There wasn't much we could do anyway, you know. Joey has a habit of breaking them after I fix them. So I always have him test it. Oh, we got the 500 on the Gunsmoke relay. I always have him test it because he's sure to find whatever needs broke. That's one game.
Boy, it's working perfectly. Till I said that.
Look what you did, Joe. All right.
Got it. I'm gonna let that one slide.
The 0 reel was rolling on. Gunsmoke relay.
They cheated me.
I only got 200.
I hit that button 10 seconds ago.
Man, that center post is crazy. Ball and play number 2.
The flippers are real strong for them small ones.
Yeah, for 2-inch flippers, for whatever reason, these things are strong as crap. Gunsmoke relay. Boom, boom, baby.
Look at that. See that? Hit it all the way to the top.
I gotta say, people, and I know I say this a lot, and I'm gonna say this. This is one of the absolute finest Chicago coin pinball machines that there is. It's just a cool game, and it plays well, and it was it wasn't a pain to work on. Like there's no design flaws in the electrical stuff. Now on the later Chicago coins, we ran into that point where some of the boards, the little PCBs, burn up and stuff. Man, he got 500 again.
I fall for that every time.
But this is a 60s model Chicago coin. It's fun to play, and it was very repairable. There's nothing wrong with repairing it. It's just as simple to repair as another company's. And this isn't our game. I'm not trying to sell it to you. We're just fixing it for a guy. So this era Chicago coin are pretty cool, in my opinion. Now remember at the beginning we switched that jack to make it strong instead of normal. So we high tapped it. So that's one of the reasons the flippers are stronger.
Is it like a weird number?
Show me.
Oh.
Video games. What do you think, folks? Did the ball saver come up yet?
Yeah, I think so. There it is.
All right, Joey put it through the motions and he didn't break anything. I think it's pretty good, Joe.
Top of the line.
All right, so leave your comments below. Let us know what you think. Now, if you like this particular game, we've had several of these and we've filmed videos of them. So there is a playlist that this video is part of, and there's a whole bunch of other videos of this same game, the other version we had that had the side art and all of that. So hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comments below. Make sure to give us a thumbs up for taking the trouble to film it for you. We didn't have to do all that. We're waiting on a customer. Somebody's supposed to come buy something. But we figured we'd film this video before they got here. Hey, I wonder if other customers come by and see the lights out there. They're not going to come in and give us money.
Well, there went that.
Oh, God. Here we go.
It's broke.
We might have lost money. All right, folks. So we'll see you on the next video. Now, don't forget to check out my brother, Donnie. Our brother, Donnie, has his own channel here on YouTube. There's a link down below. Joey and I work on arcade games, pinball machines, and jukeboxes. My brother Donnie works on old vehicles, old buildings, and right now we're working on renovating a mobile home. So go check that out. I'm over there with him on his channel a lot, and we will see you here in a couple days with another pinball machine video.